Jim Mulligan, interview, take 2.
Orson Swindle tells a story of getting to a place of pretty bleak despair, wanting to give up. And he hears another prisoner being taken into a cell close to him, and realizes it's Cag Stockdale. And Cag has been brutally beaten, his knee is broken, and Orson is whispering to the other guys around him, and they come up with a question, and he says, you know what, let me ask the old man. And he calls down to Cag Stockdale. He says, we need direction. We need, understanding here of how we should be proceeding. Years later, when on the day of your release, Orson goes up and introduces himself to then Commander Stockdale and says, you know, you saved my life that night. I needed your leadership. And Stockdale turned to him and said, what you don't know is that that night I was really down and really in my bleakest place, and I wanted to give up. And when I realized you guys needed me, I realized I had to keep going. Sir, if you could speak to me about the responsibility of leadership, and I know that you understand this, you talk about leading by example, but also the toll on the leader, because the leader is also a human being who is subject to bleak moments of despair. How did being both a leader and a follower help you in your military experience?
One of the good things that we came up with very early in the game, again, started with Denton and Stockdale. When you are in a position of leadership and you were then physically abused to the point where you really couldn't be an effective leader because they were on you all 24/7. You would pass the lead to the next guy and say, you got it, take it from here, and I'll come back when I'm ready to come back. I'll come back on the line. So we had this pass the lead down the line, which was very, very effective because particularly in the big purges that we had in late 66 and all of 67, the various people who were leading would get whacked so hard and they really couldn't be effective leader, but they were not reluctant to pass it on because that had been established, okay? You can't be a leader and run the resistance deal if they're on you 24 hours a day for 7 days in a row type of deal, okay? So you have to have the confidence to be able to pass it on and to the next guy who's in position to lead and let him take it on. And if he gets in the same position, he passes it on. And we all understood that. So that really gave us a lot of continuity in resisting their programs. That was our whole objective, of course, to resist the psychological pressures, okay, which I think in a lot of ways were more vicious than the physical deal. They really were masters at putting psychological pressure on you when they wanted to take you out of contention, you might say. And as a result of this, for example, the leadership that I was with, they gave up on us, so they sent us to Alcatraz. What they didn't realize, we had already established the resistant format. And whether we were there or we weren't, that doesn't make any difference. Stockdale put his code out there, so did Denton, okay? And it was very, very interesting that the Vietnamese, they never really understood us. We never really understood them. Their pitch to me was always, they would take me to a quiz and no, they want me to write a letter to President Johnson at the time and make a statement. And of course, I'm not going to do that. And they completely, finally lose patience and say, well, we leave you to our guards, and when the guards are finished, you will say the words, "Bao Kao, we will come," and then you'll do it. Well, that's the way it was, okay? So you'd go through that deal, and you'd hang in as long as you could, and finally you're washed out, and you capitulate. And they come back in, and they allow you to write what they have and to read into a tape right now. Then they throw you into solitary with leg irons and wearing only your skivvies and something like that. And that's where you're at the end of your rope, and you really are ashamed because you have failed yourself, okay? But the secret of success is when you're lying there, to know that they come back tomorrow, you're going to do the same thing. Their pitch was, you guys, what's the matter with you? Your people will understand. They know you got it. They know you. They understand the situation you're in. They won't care that you wrote this. They won't care that you made this. And I would say, and the other guys would say, well, I don't care. I care. I care. My fellow POWs, particularly in Alcatraz when they tortured us one by one. I'd say, I care. And they care. Okay? And that's enough. Okay? They couldn't understand that. It's not their culture. Their culture would be just roll over. It's too bad, so it's okay. But our culture's different because we know what we believed in. As a matter of fact, we were pretty much all Christians and practicing Christians. They used to call us the believers, which I thought that was a very nice way of putting it. Yes, we are the believers. We believe in God, we believe in our country, we believe in the Constitution, and we believe in each other. We're really believers. They couldn't understand that. They never really considered how valuable we were to American society until the POW wives made such a noise in Washington and around the country and went to Paris and started hassling publicly. They were only holding us about 347 or 8 at that time. They couldn't fathom that a country of 300 million people are worried about 300 POWs. They just didn't imagine, and that's what blew their minds, okay? And that's what caused a lot of, the action of the POW wives caused a lot of treatment to be improved. When they figured it all out, it was by the time Ho Chi Minh died, all of a sudden they're starving us to death in Alcatraz, and the next day, all of a sudden, they're giving us extra food, and they're a little bit more careful, and they cut out the torture pretty much because there was nothing really to get. But that became a part of us from the PO wives' effort on our behalf. And the Vietnamese, the culture, just couldn't believe that, okay? That they would send 500,000 guys down to South Vietnam every year and get half of them blown off, and the next year another 500,000. And to think of outfit like the United States is concerned about 345 POWs, okay? The difference, it really was amazing, yeah.
Ev Alvarez said exactly what you said to me, which is that the Vietnamese never understood the American warrior.
Oh, no. We didn't understand. I didn't understand them because I came from the Mediterranean culture. I spent most of my time in the Med, and Harry Jenkins used to say to me, Muldoon, you get yourself in trouble because you can't go at these people this way. I'd go at them straight Bostonian right in their face. Oh, man, I'd pay a terrible price for that. He said, you have to learn how to back around and tweak them a little bit. I never really got very good at that, but they didn't understand me for sure, and I didn't understand them.
Well, it's safe to say that the Vietnamese and the communist society that was infiltrating North Vietnam, they rule from a central committee.
Right.
Everyone else is expected to follow
Right.
suit.
Absolutely.
They never understood freedom, really.
No, they don't.
Thought by forcing you to say something, they could sell their culture to Americans. But Americans would never conceive of capturing an enemy and needing them to write "America is great." We already know America is great.
Right.
It's
Right,
inconceivable to us.
Right.
In the mere fact that they never understood that your freedom, what your freedom actually meant, because they didn't have it themselves. They were told what to do. That made a huge difference in the war you fought behind bars.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Because your entire system was based on freedom of choice.
Individual freedom, particularly. Okay. Collectively, I always, the communists always put people in groups of threes so that you always have one guy who's not quite in the system. And when you, on one and one, you got two people, you could adjust pretty well. You put the third person in there, and one's watching 2 or 3, and two's watching 1 and 3, and three's watching 2 and 1. That's their mentality. And they don't, for what I saw, I didn't see any individual loyalty between people and the gods or anything. They seem to be always sort of suspicious of one another, okay? And I picked that up, which is a cultural type of thing, you know?
So let's talk about the ways that, I mean, what an extraordinary part of your experience was the brotherhood you shared with your fellow POWs, the way you unified in the face of adversity, in the face of trial and struggle. And part of the backbone of that was the communication systems that you developed together. Speak to me about that.
Well, we had the trap code, which worked very well between cells. And it's a very easy code, as you know. It's a 25-letter code. You get rid of the letter K, and, you know, I don't have anything to tap on that'll make a noise, but, you know, hey, B. All the way down to Z. Okay. And we really invented Twitter, and because we had really abbreviations for everything. And for example, the guys had a lot of solitary, particularly senior guys, depended on tap code, so we were very, very proficient. And I could tap to Stockdale or Denton and carry on a conversation between us as if we were just talking, okay? People can't believe how proficient we became that way. Stockdale kept me alive for well over a year. He was the only guy I was able to tap to when at Alcatraz. He could tap to me, and he would flash at that time to Tanner and stuff. And so we had communications between the other 9 POWs that were in a line, and ourselves, Stockdale and I were separate off in another cell in Alcatraz. But I think we always signed up. Every night we did the same thing. Good night, God bless you. That was a standard sign-up, all the time, okay, the entire time I was there. It was also one of the interesting things that seemed to occur out of nowhere. You know, military guys are pretty tough on the language sometimes. And we have an easy way of slipping into relatively coarseness. And all of a sudden, and I don't know where it originated, but the guys were in 4 guys to a cell, maybe. All of a sudden, somebody said, let's cut out this swearing. And whoever started it worked very good because they passed it on to somebody else. And it became a somewhat camp objective. We raised ourselves and we quit swearing. That's quite interesting because it wasn't, by the time I was aware of it, was in full motion, and that's just the way it was, okay? We don't have to swear anymore, we're Americans type of deal. But that was an interesting thing that popped up. I think of course, we had written communications where we had at different times pass stuff, particularly in the last a year and a half, 2 years. The 3 colonels and the 6 commanders were running the entire Hilton with written messages that we passed through the wall to Max Stott, and he dropped it in the stick, and then they picked it up in room 7, and when they got it, they tapped it to the other guys. And we developed written codes, tic-tac-toe codes. We had a code based on tic-tac-toe. We had a code on clock code, okay? And if one of our messages was interrupted, we didn't use that particular code again. It became very sophisticated. We did have some very, very interesting programs going on that required us to, the seniors, to have good security. We did that. That was very important. I think that Denton used to do the exercise code. We'd be out and we knew somebody could say it, so that's how he would do exercise code. And the Vietnamese never caught on to that. We did flash code. We could be standing up and sending code. When I was at the cathedral and I saw Stratton with his arms around Cat, and I'm saying, what the hell is that guy doing? I didn't know Stratton at the time, you know, and he was all smiles and Cat. All of a sudden, he swings Cat around. I'm way in the corner, and he had spotted me. And when he's like this, all of a sudden, he sends me Dick Stratton. And I sent him Jim Mulligan, okay? But I had a guard next to me, so I just sent him with my foot. And he gives me a thumbs up, you know? And that was done in the middle of the cathedral. We were probably at least 7,500 feet apart, you know? So communication was important, it really was. And for good morale, too, you know. I became very, very close to Ron Storrs, who died in Alcatraz in April of 1969. April of 1970. And we were able to keep our minds active by telling each other about our families, where we were raised, what we did. And that, when you had that type of access, even though you're in solitary, it's a tremendous morale booster. I think that I was very, very fortunate. Jim Stockdale was one cell away from me from the time we got to Alcatraz till the time he left. We got there in October of '67, and he left in January of '69. So he was my one man to be able to tap to. So we not only knew about our families and our own history, we used to have long conversations about history in general, and he was a very well-educated guy and was pretty educated, so we had some great discussions about everything. One of the things that we decided, the one thing in life that we had wished that we had wasted our time on was the various social functions that we went to as naval officers, where cocktail parties, okay? And we felt that we had wasted an awful lot of time at cocktail parties, and we wouldn't do that when we got out. And when I got out, I really hated the social responsibilities that the Navy imposed on me. They said, you know, you've got to attend these. And it really was a hardship before. In my younger days, I probably would have enjoyed it, but after living in solitary, being with Stockdale, I did not enjoy it at all. I wanted to, and I still don't. I don't like to get involved in those fluffy things, okay? One-on-ones with serious people is a different story. Stockdale was remarkable. He was a good guy to be able to talk to. He told me all about Stanford and all the political deals he did at Stanford, and I told him about all my political deals with the Boston Democrats and the Kennedys and that group, you know, so we had a lot in common.
And I understand that you were quite the meal planner in Alcatraz.
The what?
The meal planner? You would design meals, including what cigar you were going to smoke and what drink you were going to have?
No, that's not me.
Oh, it's not?
That was not my forte. No.
I had read that you were, I think it was in Honor Bound. It was in Defiant. They talked about you designing the meal, and you would design which wine would go.
Stockdale and I would design the meals for ourselves every night. Yeah, yeah. I had misunderstood what you said. Yeah, and we were very particular about the dessert we would have, that type of deal. Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because that's part of, there's something inventive about that I think is very important.
Well, you know, we were starving to death, right? So you think a lot about food when you don't have any, really. And, you know, you remember those hamburgers that if you could have only got a hamburger right then, and maybe a slice of onion on it or a pickle in a roll, it could be a big thing. And so we actually planned to like a Sunday meal, okay? And it was an enjoyable task to sit back and think. I was never big on the wines, but I was big on the food. And tell Stockton, well, the first thing I'm going to do when I get out is get some steak and eggs. I like eggs and I like steak. And we did that. You know, when we got out on that first day in the hospital, I had a terrible time. The doctors in the Philippines decided that our poor stomachs would not be able to handle whatever the foods were available, and they had this big conference going, which took a couple of hours, and we were starving. And finally, I went up to one of the head nurses and said, you know, these guys are getting ready to riot. They're hungry. They want something to eat. And this is BS what these guys are doing, trying to figure it out. We just want to eat. So some smart guy said, okay, open the cafeteria, let them order what they want. And that's exactly what happened. But that, food meant an awful lot to us, and each one of us is, well, they even filmed me, on CBS had me film scoffing down food like I was going out of sight in there. So food was a big thought for us, particularly at Alcatraz. Alcatraz was so remote and so much solitary, and the food was so bad. We got and so little. And okay, I can honestly tell you this: I dropped some rice on the floor, a couple of grains of rice. Well, I would pick up those rice and eat them. Okay. Yeah.
So these ways in which, and particularly, you underwent an enormous amount of solitary.
Yes, more than 3.5 years.
Exactly. Can you speak, because it's doubtful that most of the military who listen to this will ever undergo an experience like what you underwent.
Yeah, it was really solitary.
I'm sorry, Jim. Let's give it 1 second, Jim. Cut?
Okay, can you hear what I'm saying?
Okay, let me find out what's going on. Let's cut for a second.
Okay.
Would you like